Every year, over 30 million vehicles fail their emissions test in the United States alone. And if you drive an SUV, you are statistically more likely to fail than almost any other vehicle category. The average cost to diagnose and fix an emissions failure is between $200 and $1,800. Some owners are spending that money every single year on the same SUV. But here is what blows my mind. Most of those failures are completely preventable, not with expensive repairs, not with a mechanic, not even with a single tool. There is a technique Japanese mechanics have been using for decades, and the Western automotive world has largely ignored it. 5 minutes, no tools, and your SUV walks through emissions with clean numbers. Today, I am breaking down exactly how it works, and why your dealership will never tell you about it. First, let me tell you what's actually happening when your sport utility vehicle fails. The emissions test is not checking your engine. It is not checking your oil. It is almost entirely checking one thing: your catalytic converter. That device is bolted underneath your vehicle, about the size of a loaf of bread. It converts toxic exhaust gases, such as hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide, into harmless nitrogen and water vapor. When it is working perfectly, it runs between 400 and 900 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, conversion efficiency is above 95%. Your sport utility vehicle passes with room to spare. Here is the problem. When you drive a short trip to the emissions testing station, your catalytic converter never reaches full operating temperature. It may be sitting at 200 to 250 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, conversion efficiency drops to 60 or 70%. Your hydrocarbons spike and your carbon monoxide spikes. The machine prints out a failure slip, and you are suddenly standing in a parking lot wondering what went wrong. And this is not a theory. This is documented. A study published by the California Air Resources Board found that catalytic converter efficiency drops by as much as 40% when measured at partial operating temperature. 40%. That is the difference between passing and failing for a huge percentage of sport utility vehicles on the road today. Your sport utility vehicle might be in perfect mechanical condition and still fail, simply because of how you drove to the test. So where does Japan come in? Japan runs one of the strictest vehicle inspection programs on the planet. It is called the Shaken. Every vehicle in Japan must pass this inspection on a strict schedule, and the emissions standards are brutally tight, stricter than the US and stricter than most of Europe. Japanese owners and mechanics have had decades to develop a pre-inspection routine that gets vehicles through. And because the standards are so demanding, shortcuts do not work. What came out of that culture of forced problem-solving is a specific driving protocol that conditions your entire emissions system before the test measures it. It costs nothing. It requires nothing. And it flat out works. Here is the actual technique, step by step. Before you drive to your emissions test, you need to do a specific highway drive. Not just any drive. A structured drive that is designed to push your catalytic converter all the way to full operating temperature and keep it there long enough to do something critical: burn off accumulated carbon deposits from your oxygen sensors, your fuel injectors, and the catalytic converter substrate itself. Here is what the drive looks like. Step 1. Start your SUV cold. Let it idle for exactly 90 seconds, nothing more. You want the engine warmed up enough to manage fuel trim correctly, but you are not warming up the catalytic converter yet. That happens on the road. Step 2. Drive to a highway or a road where you can maintain steady speed. Merge onto the highway and bring your speed up to between 55 and 65 miles per hour. Now hold it there. Do not use cruise control. You want light throttle pressure, maintaining speed naturally. Do this for a minimum of 15 minutes. What is happening here is important. Your exhaust gas temperature is climbing. Your catalytic converter is being fed a consistent stream of hot exhaust. The converter substrate, which is a honeycomb of platinum, palladium, and rhodium, is reaching the activation threshold where it begins converting at full efficiency. Step 3. After 15 minutes of steady cruising, accelerate firmly up to about 70 miles per hour. Not aggressively, firmly. Hold 70 for about 3 to 4 minutes. This pushes exhaust gas temperatures higher and forces the oxygen sensors to cycle rapidly between rich and lean readings. This cycling is what burns carbon off the sensor tip. A carbon-fouled oxygen sensor throws off your air-fuel ratio readings. When the sensor is clean and cycling properly, your engine management system trims the fuel mixture correctly, which means cleaner combustion, which means lower emissions at the tailpipe. Step 4. Slow back down to 55 to 60 miles per hour and hold it for another 5 minutes. Then exit the highway and drive directly, without stopping if you can help it, straight to the testing station. Do not turn the engine off. Do not sit in a parking lot and wait. The moment your engine shuts down, the catalytic converter starts losing temperature. You lose roughly 100 degrees of converter temperature for every minute the engine is off. You want to pull straight into the testing bay with everything running hot. That entire highway portion takes about 23 to 25 minutes from start to finish. The 5 minutes the title is referring to is the actual test itself, which runs faster and cleaner when your system is properly prepared. But I will be honest with you, the prep drive is where the work actually happens, and you need to understand why so you can trust the process. Before we keep going, if this is already saving you money, hit that like button. There is more coming that your mechanic definitely does not want you knowing. Now, here is where you can take this even further. Japanese mechanics pair this driving protocol with one additional step that costs about $8 and multiplies the results. The night before your emissions test, add a bottle of concentrated fuel system cleaner directly to your gas tank. Not just any cleaner. You want a cleaner that contains polyethyramine, often listed on labels as PEA. This is the active compound that actually dissolves carbon deposits in your fuel injectors, intake valves, and combustion chamber. The science behind PEA is well established. A study from Southwest Research Institute found that PEA-based fuel system cleaners reduced hydrocarbon emissions by up to 33% in tested vehicles after a single tank treatment. 33%. If you were borderline on your emissions test, that single number could be the difference between passing and failing. Common products that use PEA as their primary active ingredient include Chevron Techron, Seafoam Motor Treatment, and BG44K. These are not exotic chemicals. You will find them at any auto parts store for under $15. Add it the night before. Drive normally that evening, then do the structured highway run in the morning of your test. The cleaner has had time to work through your injectors, and the heat from the highway run turns off whatever deposits have been loosened. Now let me tell you who this is especially critical for. If you own a turbocharged sports utility vehicle, pay close attention. Turbocharged engines, which are now standard across most sports utility vehicle lineups from Ford, Chevrolet, GMC, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, you name it, accumulate carbon deposits on their intake valves significantly faster than naturally aspirated engines. This is because of direct injection. Direct injection sprays fuel directly into the combustion chamber, bypassing the intake valves entirely. That means there is no fuel washing over the intake valves to keep them clean. Over time, carbon from recirculated crankcase vapors bakes onto the back of the intake valves like charcoal. It restricts airflow, it disrupts combustion, and it dramatically increases hydrocarbon emissions. If your sports utility vehicle has a turbocharged direct injection engine and is older than 4 or 5 years, there is a reasonable chance you have meaningful carbon buildup on your intake valves. The highway drive protocol helps because it runs the engine hard enough to increase combustion temperatures, which helps oxidize some of that carbon. The PEA cleaner helps with injector deposits, but for severe valve carbon buildup, that requires either walnut blasting or chemical intake cleaning performed by a mechanic. That is a job beyond the Zero Tools scope of today's video, but worth knowing. Let's talk about OBD2 readiness monitors, because this is the other way people fail without knowing why. Modern SUVs built after 1996 have an onboard diagnostic system called OBD2. That system continuously runs diagnostic checks on your emissions-related components, the oxygen sensors, the catalytic converter, the evaporative emission system, and several others. Each of these checks is called a readiness monitor. When a monitor finishes its test cycle and confirms everything is working correctly, it sets itself to ready. Here is where people get caught. If you recently disconnected your battery, cleared a check engine code, or had any electrical work done on your SUV, all of those readiness monitors get wiped and reset to not ready. If you drive straight to the emissions test before those monitors have run and completed their cycles, your SUV will fail the inspection automatically, regardless of whether your emissions are actually clean. The testing equipment reads not ready, and that counts as a failure in most states. The structured highway drive I described solves this problem too, because driving at steady highway speeds for 20+ minutes is exactly the type of cycle that triggers most OBD2 readiness monitors to complete and set. By the time you pull into that testing bay, your monitors are ready, your converter is hot, and your oxygen sensors are clean and cycling. You have addressed all 3 of the main failure points in a single drive. Here's something that will make you genuinely angry. Most dealerships and quick lube shops offer what they call an emissions pre-check or pre-test inspection for a fee between $30 and $100. In many cases, all they are doing is plugging in an OBD reader to check your readiness monitors and telling you whether any codes are present. That is it. They are not addressing your catalytic converter temperature. They are not cleaning your fuel system. They are running a 90-second computer check and charging you $75 for the privilege of knowing information that your own dashboard would tell you for free. The technique we have covered today costs you nothing except a tank of gas for the highway drive and optionally $8 to $15 for a bottle of fuel system cleaner. For the overwhelming majority of sports utility vehicles that are failing or borderline failing because of cold catalytic converters, dirty sensors, and unsatisfied readiness monitors, this protocol addresses all of it without a single tool, without a single mechanic, and without writing a single check. One last thing before you go. This technique works best on SUVs that do not have an existing mechanical problem causing the failure. If your check engine light is on, that is a different conversation. A lit check engine light means a fault code is stored in your ECU, and that will cause an automatic failure in most testing scenarios, regardless of what your emissions numbers are. A stored fault code needs to be diagnosed and resolved before the protocol above becomes relevant. But if your light is off and your SUV is failing anyway, or if you are nervous heading into a test, or if you want to give yourself the best possible odds without spending money you do not need to spend, do the highway drive the morning of the test. Add the fuel cleaner the night before if you can. Drive straight to the station without shutting the engine off. That is the technique. Developed over decades of Japanese mechanical culture, built into the pre-inspection routine of millions of vehicles in a country with some of the toughest emission standards on Earth, and completely free to use. The industry does not want you to know this because a failing vehicle is a revenue opportunity. But now you know. Use it. If this video saved you a repair bill, drop a comment below and let me know. Hit that like button if you are glad you watched, and subscribe so you do not miss the next one. See you then.